If you're somewhere between 20% and 30% body fat right now, your body is doing specific things in this range that most guys know nothing about. And each of these levels come with real changes to your hormones, your metabolism, and just how you look. After 10 years of coaching executives and business owners through each of these stages, I'm going to break down exactly what is happening at each one, starting with what most guys have been ignoring for far too long. Before we get into 20% and below, you need to quickly see what's actually happening at around 25% body fat and above that range. Because once you see this, the lower levels will make a lot more sense to you. If you're at 25% body fat or above, the body doesn't just see this as a bit of extra fat. At this level, visceral fat is already building up around the organs. I'm talking about the fat that you can't grab with your hands, the fat that's packed around your liver, your gut, and your heart. And this fat is biologically active because it contains an enzyme called aromatase, which converts testosterone into estrogen. So your body is actively working against its own hormones while you're trying to fix this problem of losing fat. And that explains the low drive, the slow recovery, the flat moods, the stubborn belly that doesn't seem to go, no matter what diet or exercise plan that you're trying to follow. And on top of that, chronic inflammation is elevated. Insulin sensitivity is already starting to drop. Your joint load's going to be higher on the body. Sleep quality is going to be lower. And nearly 2/3 of obese men in this category have moderate to severe obstructive sleep apnea. And that's not just feeling tired in the morning. That is your airway being physically compressed while you're asleep. And the primary treatment for moderate to severe cases is using a CPAP machine. Most guys at this body fat range have no idea where they're headed. And the disease risk numbers are hard to ignore. Type 2 diabetes raises cardiovascular disease health risk by 2 to 4 times. And obesity associated with type 2 diabetes accounts for 90 to 95% of all diagnosed cases in adults. This isn't a guilt trip, it's just context. And here is why this matters. Once you actually understand what is happening inside your body at this level, you stop seeing this as something that's kind of vague and frustratingly happening to you, and you start to see it as a specific solvable problem. And that shift changes everything because now you're not just trying to lose weight, you're fixing something that has a clear mechanism and a clear solution and a path forward. And that first drop to 20% changes more than what most guys expect. So getting 20% and below isn't just about chasing a six-pack. Most guys won't see abs at 20%, but that doesn't mean that nothing is actually happening, because under the surface, the body is starting to work a little bit differently. The visceral fat that was building up around the organs at 25% or above starts to shrink. That means the aromatase activity that we talked about starts reducing a little bit. Then your testosterone will recover more, insulin sensitivity improves, and chronic inflammation will start to decrease. Your energy starts to regulate more consistently throughout the day. Your sleep quality will improve. Your hunger will be a bit more stable. And just those cravings for like sugars and snackings that were kind of automatic for you will start to reduce a bit. You actually start to want to eat nutritious food instead of fighting yourself over it. And in the gym, you can push yourself a little bit harder. Hitting new strength numbers and building muscle feels less of a grind and more like something your body is finally on board with. You won't feel gassed out halfway through every session. And this is all happening well before you can see your ab outline. Now, most guys at this point are thinking, I feel better, but the belly still kind of looks a little bit the same. But externally, the changes are starting to show. Your face and jaw will sharpen up. Your neck will look a little bit different. Shirts will stop tightening up around the belly. You might walk into a room and someone will pull you aside and say, hey, if you lost weight, you're looking a little bit different. You look a bit younger. Have you been training? And that's really where that 20% to then 15% starts doing its work. But here's the part that nobody warns you about. This can actually be the toughest stretch mentally because you're feeling better, you're moving better, people are noticing your results, but you still can't see clear muscle definition. There's no outlines around the midsection, and that gap between how good things are going internally and what you can actually see in the mirror. That's where a lot of guys start to lose confidence and start second guessing themselves So look, if you are stuck in this range right now, that is exactly the kind of man I help build systems for. Links in the description to learn more. But when you hit 15% and below, it pays off in a way that is hard to ignore. Here's where something more significant shifts. Once the majority of the visceral and the subcutaneous fat has cleared, then your insulin sensitivity starts to properly regulate. Your liver processes glucose more efficiently, which means your body isn't automatically converting carbs into stored fat almost immediately, like it was before. Energy becomes a lot more stable, and your hormonal picture starts to clear up in a very specific way. Insulin is doing its job properly. Your hunger hormones, leptin and ghrelin, start to regulate the way they're supposed to when you're eating and not eating. Leptin tells your brain you're full when you actually are, and ghrelin stops spiking randomly throughout the day. So your appetite signals are going to start making sense again. Your recovery improves because your growth hormone pulses during sleep become more consistent, and libido is improving along with a man's sex life. The whole system starts running the way it's supposed to. And here's something important to understand about fat loss in this range. Below 20%, progress is a lot more gradual. The scale won't always reflect what's happening every single week. There's typically a bit of a lag effect. So your body can be consistently getting leaner even when the scale isn't dropping day to day. And most guys misread that as progress is stalling out. But it's just the nature of this phase. But this is a point where most guys just think,
oh, maybe my body isn't going to respond. Maybe nothing is going to change for me.
But it will. Below 15%, the mirror also starts becoming a lot more useful. You'll actually notice the visible changes and effects of water and bloating a lot more clearly. Some days, your muscle definition will look a little bit softer, and other days, you'll look tighter and more defined, even within a 7-day period. And that is not regression, that's just your body at a level of leanness where those daily shifts are a lot more visible. This means you can track real changes week to week in a way that you couldn't do before in those higher percentages. So 15% below is a healthy and realistic place for any man to maintain long term. No man needs to be sitting above 15% body fat unless there is a specific reason for it. Hormonally and from a body composition standpoint, 11 to 15% is the optimal range. You're not carrying any unnecessary visceral fat or subcutaneous fat around the body. But here's what most guys miss. You can still be at 15% body fat and hormonally be out of whack. If you're lacking muscle mass and your testosterone is low and you're stressed, estrogen will be elevated. Visceral fat can still be higher than it should be relative to your lean mass and your body weight. So a guy can hit 15% on the scale and still be in very poor metabolic health and not be happy with what he sees in the mirror if the muscle isn't there to support it. And that is why muscle mass, regular training, quality sleep, stress management, and good quality nutrition matter far more beyond just losing weight. These are what keep you optimally healthy and in peak condition at this level and below. And this is also why GLP-1s like Ozempic and Mounjaro and all the other 50 other brands aren't enough on their own. They can reduce your appetite, they can help the scale number drop by 10, 20%, whatever it is, but they don't build muscle, they don't fully regulate all your hormones or fix your metabolic foundation. You can lose weight on a GLP-1 and still be in very poor metabolic health. The system still has to be there. But most guys who reach 20% never make it to 15%. Not because they stopped trying, but because the body changed, but their strategy didn't. And what got them to 20% stops producing the same results. And instead of adjusting the system, they're pushing harder with an approach that stopped working a while back. And these are usually the same men who are running a business and leading teams and solving complex problems every day, who are highly capable in all these other areas of life, but applying the wrong tool to the wrong phase of their body transformation journey. And then wondering, why the fuck isn't it working? And that trap is exactly what this next point is about. So just like getting stuck at 20%, guys are just as easily getting stuck at 15%. And the reason is usually the same thing. They went too hard from getting from here to here, and that is why things start to blow up. Because if the approach wasn't sustainable in getting there, then getting below 15% is going to feel impossible to do. And the body is now running leaner, so there's a tighter buffer than before at higher levels. And there's less tolerance for a plan that's held together by all out effort and willpower. And this is where the details start to matter more than an all out effort. It's a difference between, painting a wall and then painting a fine portrait. One requires a roller and just slapping the paint on. The other requires really fine detailed work to get that precision in the image. Now, most guys show up to the portrait with a paint roller and they're just pushing harder, cutting more, adding more things to do, deleting more foods, and wondering why it's always falling apart every couple of weeks. Now, getting below 15% doesn't mean you have to double your efforts. It requires a more precise system running consistently over a longer stretch of time. Now, what it actually requires is more like doubling your patience and your consistency, because the men who never adjust their system at this stage are usually still stuck in the same body 2, 3, 5 years from now. Same frustration, just getting older. And it's not just the body that stays stuck. It's the energy you bring into the room, the way you carry yourself in front of your colleagues, your teams, your partners, whatever it is. The standard that you hold yourself in every other area of life. The longer this stays unresolved, the wider that gap gets. And what happens at 11% body fat is something that most guys have never actually experienced. 11% is where everything you've been working toward is now finally on show. The muscle you've built or the muscle you didn't build. The shoulder separation, the chest definition, the obliques, the abs, the V taper, the clothes are starting to hang off you differently. You need to go change your wardrobe. You feel more energized, more agile. Some guys say they feel better than they have in their teens or their 20s when they get down to that range. Many guys can come off sleep apnea machines and at this level drastically reduce or even cut out medications. Their inflammation is lower and they just feel more free like they haven't in decades. Some people will say, oh, this is too lean, but that's not true. It just seems that way because it's become so normalized to have a big belly these days that people think being lean for some reason is unhealthy now. But 11% isn't just a visual thing. With the muscle that you've built, the quality food that you have in your diet, your sleep is sorted, your testosterone is going to be running well, your cortisol is going to be regulated and managed, insulin sensitivity is at its best, your energy, your focus and drive, they're all running at a different level than they were when you're at 25% body fat. What nobody tells you though is that the 11% requires a different relationship to the process entirely. The buffer is a lot thinner, a rough week hits a lot harder here than it's going to hit you at 20% because the leaner you are, the more you're going to notice these subtle changes. Recovery, sleep, and nutrition precision all still matter more than they ever have in the whole process. And here's the thing that most guys get wrong about this whole journey. They treat it like one continuous process with one approach. Every guy who gets lean has done this in phases, adjusting the system at each step and changing it to suit his life around him. Because consistency isn't just about being perfect, it's about having a system that works on a busy, stressful, unpredictable week. And that is what's going to carry you through when the motivation is gone and when life is just throwing problems at you. And guys who make it through all these stages, they're not superhumans. They just understood that this is the phase they're in right now, and they applied the right approach at the right time for long enough to break below. And that is the difference between spinning your wheels for years and actually getting there finally and staying there. And if you've been watching this and you're kind of recognizing yourself, somewhere in these stages that we've talked about, that is not a coincidence. This is exactly the kind of man that I work with one-on-one, who are already training, putting in the effort, but stuck in a threshold and not quite sure why the approach that has worked before has now stopped working. That is not a discipline problem. That is just a system issue, and it's a very solvable one. And my one-on-one coaching program is built specifically for this. A system built around your body, your schedule, and all of your biofeedback data. And the phase that you're actually in right now. I only work with a small number of clients at a time. So if you're serious about fixing this properly and you're done with guessing, the link is in the description below this video. Once you've checked that out, then go watch this video next to get the 5 unsexy habits to reach 15% body fat or below.